If you drive a car in Ontario, you must have auto insurance. It's the law. You also probably have some pretty strong opinions about the price you pay for that coverage and how well it protects you. Ontario pays among the highest premiums in the country, despite having among the lowest accident rates in North America. And that makes this a bread and butter issue that every new provincial government faces. As the Ford government gets set to take its turn, we've gathered the experts to take us through it all. And with that, we welcome Pete Karageorgis. He is Director of Consumer and Industry Relations at the Insurance Bureau of Canada. Ronald Bohm is the President of the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association and a partner at Blackburn Lawyers. Mary Kelly, Professor of Finance and Chair of Insurance at the Lazaridis School of Business and Economics at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. And Rona Desroches, Chair of FAIR Association of Victims for Accident Insurance Reform. That's the acronym FAIR, and we're delighted to welcome all of you to TVO tonight for this very timely conversation. We just want to say, why don't we put this graphic up, Sheldon, to start with, just to get us going here. Provincial government is doing a car insurance consultation at the moment. People have a little more time. They've got till Feb 15 to submit their feedback online, and here is why you might be interested in participating in this. It costs a lot to drive in this province. Here's the average annual insurance premium province by province. British Columbia is actually at the top of the heap right now, just over $1,600 a year. Ontario is second. Average payment, $1,445. Alberta next at $1,200 and change. Prince Edward Island comes next, almost $800. And Quebec, $661 annually. Those are some of the rates as you look across the country. Let's get started here. If you were talking to the government of Ontario now and you wanted to tell them how you think the auto insurance business is currently working, I'd like to know what you would say to them. Briefly, go.
I'd say it's not working very well. That ultimately, at least 1/3 of all claims are being denied by Ontario's auto insurers, and that's way too high of a number. So for many people, it doesn't work at all.
Chair Kelly, what would you say?
It's not working at all. It's not working anywhere in the country. I think that's important to say. Everywhere in the country you see claims are going up, premiums chasing claims. I think there needs to be a change in mentality. I think a lot of people see they have an auto accident and it's their chance to make money. There's a lottery mentality. I paid insurance for so many years and now it's my turn.
Gotcha.
And that needs to change.
We will explore all of these themes as we continue on. Ron, what would you say?
The system's broken. It's time to stop tinkering with it. It's had a succession of changes over the last 10 years that have made it worse and worse, despite good intentions. We need to start fresh. We need to rebuild a system that works for everybody, that's affordable, and is there for the people who need it when they really need it.
Pete.
Have to agree. The industry knows. We hear from consumers day in and day out, and they say the system is broken, it's not working, it's too complex, it's too expensive, we need to simplify it, we need to improve it, we need an overhaul. And we're hopeful that this government will do the hard work, will roll up their sleeves, and make the changes necessary to actually overhaul the system. We've seen over the years governments since Bob Rae that have introduced changes to the system. It's time now for a complete redo.
Let me pick up on that because I think it was the Bob Rae government back in the early 1990s that essentially put in place the system we have today, which is it's not pure no fault, it's not a pure tort system, it's kind of a mix of both. And why don't we just go back to what we had before that? Before we had this kind of hybrid system, when it was just, you get into an accident, you can sue for whatever you need. Did that system, in your view, Ron, work better?
It's a great question to understand where we are today and why the system's so broken. We really have to look at where we came from. Traditionally, for hundreds of years in this province and this great country of ours, people who were innocent victims of others' negligence could look to the courts if they couldn't resolve things out of court with insurance companies for fair compensation to put them in the place, so far as money can, where they would have been without that negligence. And that's called the tort system. It means it's a civil action, not a criminal action, other than a breach of contract. And people could make those claims, and they could get that fair compensation. And the idea came about, I think, in the 1990s to say, well, in part because of the suggestion that there was too much fighting and too many lawyers and too many court cases, that we should allow the insurance dollar to be divided up so that a lot of people could get benefits without fighting over them, without respect to whose fault it was. And let's just make sure people injured in car accidents get what they need to get better. And the idea is an interesting one, but the concern that I have with that is a philosophical one, like what's really important to us as Ontarians. And if part of that is to make sure that innocent victims get fair compensation, we have to be a little concerned if we take one insurance dollar and say, we're going to take some of that now and automatically give it to the guy who was texting while he ran through that stop sign. And that doesn't matter, and he'll get the same benefits you get, who the innocent victim. So there's a bit of a disconnect there sometimes. And what's happened over the years is the system got so complex about how to apply for those benefits that the so-called no-fault benefits are now subject to huge disputes. And I think we'd all agree that it's way too complicated, and way too many people find, I don't know how to deal with this. I still have to go to a lawyer to get help to navigate through this. And then when insurance companies deny a claim, I have to go through another system to try and get the benefit I thought I should get automatically.
Let me try this with Rona. Would we be better off if we just went to a pure no-fault system so that it's plain, it's simple, no, you don't have to go to court ever to deal with anything? On the other hand, if you are, severely damaged, you don't get to try to sue for more. If we just went pure no fault, would that be better?
I think the majority of people that are injured in car accidents are not catastrophically injured, but somewhere in the scale between a minor injury and a very serious one. So it would serve more people if we had a more simplified system. However, I think what we keep coming up against is that there's actually not enough coverage. It's not just about what we pay, it's what we're getting for the money. So what we're getting for the money right now isn't enough to actually recover with. So I think we need a richer benefit system.
To get a richer benefit system, do you have to pay more in, though?
You're going to have to pay more in. But I think all of us buy insurance for two reasons. Not only because we want coverage for us, but we also want the person that we might injure to have enough coverage to recover. And that's just not happening. I think if we looked at what happened to someone that we injured last year and we called them, we'd find a very different story. The system isn't taking care of car accident victims. And I don't think a purely tort system would correct that problem. I do think that we need a total revamp. We have to totally rethink what we're getting, and we need to better inform the consumer, because a big part of the disconnect here is that consumers think they have great coverage. We get into our cars, we think if something bad happens, we'll be taken care of. That's not true anymore, and that has to do with how the government and insurers have been educating the consumers.
Okay, Pete, as the government considers alternatives, should an alternative that they consider be pure no fault? You get hurt, you get this much money, period, full stop.
Well, that's a system that's similar to what exists in Quebec. And so the limits there are lower. There's a few points that I want to make here in response. And first of all, the no-fault system that was introduced as we heard, to speed up the process for people who are injured. I actually, back in 1989, was a victim as a pedestrian of a motor vehicle collision. I spent 3 days in intensive care, and it took me months to recover. And so
were you compensated?
Well, that's the issue, is to get any compensation, I had to go through a process of assessments that still exists today, having to go through courts and all that expense. It was trying, it was troubling, especially, and we see it today, even individuals who are injured in crashes are still obligated to go through completions of forms and assessments and disputes.
What province did the accident happen in?
This happened in Ontario. It happened in downtown Toronto.
And were you able to sue the person who hit you?
Yes, because 6 months later, I wouldn't have been able to. That's when no fault came in Ontario. The focus needs to really be on helping people. And as a victim myself, I didn't get the sense that the system was trying to help me get better.
What was your sense about what the system was trying to do?
I had to get through various hoops in order to document or monetize my injuries, as opposed to wanting to get better. I was in school, I wanted to get class. It delayed my education by a year because of the injuries that I suffered. People are going through that today. We have to focus on getting people the care they need, not necessarily the cash and putting dollar amounts. We need to get people better, faster, so that they can return to their daily lives.
Are you fully recovered?
And that's Well, some would say no, and I still have issues as a result of that collision. As I said, I was a pedestrian. I was on the sidewalk, and so I feel for anyone who's involved in a crash and a collision today. We need a system that meets the needs of consumers, especially those people who are injured. So some of the focus needs to be on getting people the proper care, and that is another discussion that we have to have, because we've seen through the insurance industry in Ontario, the introduction that we had was that we have fewer collisions here in Ontario, yet we pay more for insurance. Why do we pay more? Because the collisions that were happening, they have a higher severity. They cost more. Ontario leads the way in Canada in terms of injury recovery costs for individuals. We, on average, see an injured individual receive $30,000. Now, I'm not saying $30,000, just over $30,000, because it's not all in treatment. There was a report that was done a while ago, and it highlighted that issue for government. So the next closest province or area in terms of treatment costs for injured individuals is Atlantic Canada, at a third less than that, just under $10,000. So we've got a problem that we need to solve.
Can I put that to Mary Kelly here? Do we pay a lot more in premiums for our auto insurance because our system, it's clearly not because we have more accidents, because we don't, but our system costs so much more to operate?
Our system costs more, and our benefits, although Rona said they're not broad enough, they are broader than most jurisdictions, Saskatchewan, Manitoba being quite different. Like, we just have a broader range of coverage, and experience is the more coverage you have, the more you pay for it.
Let me raise something that this came up a couple of years ago. The previous government, the Liberal government, hired a civil servant named David Marshall to look at the whole provincial insurance system. And he made a report to the government of Ontario. And Sheldon, if you would, bring up this graphic here, we'll read along here. From his report called Fair Benefits Fairly Delivered. Ontario's roads continue to be, he said, among the safest in North America. In 2013, Ontario's fatality rate of 0.54 per 10,000 licensed drivers was the second lowest ever recorded. It was the second lowest in all of North America, behind only the District of Columbia. In 2013, Ontario's injury rate of 62.1 per 10,000 licensed drivers is the lowest injury rate ever recorded and among the lowest in Canada. That suggests we're pretty good drivers, doesn't it?
I would think so, and I don't think it's a good reflection of what is actually going on in a claim, because insurers consistently spend more on assessing injuries than they do treating injuries. So when you say $30,000 is the average amount of a claim, it's partly the insurers just investigating whether you're injured or not. And so if they spend more investigating than treating, it's pushing up the cost of claims. So I think in a sense, insurers are way too active in the file. I realize that they want to control where their dollars go, but essentially I've paid premiums so that if I get injured, they've agreed to cover the cost of whatever it costs to get me to a better state.
Well,
that's not happening.
Let me put this to Ron, because of course your critics are going to point out that one of the reasons our premiums are so high and that the system costs so much, despite the fact we have fewer per capita accidents, is because of trial lawyers. Is that the case?
So there's no doubt that our system is so complicated that people find that those automatic benefits that we've been talking about, and that even, that Pete's been talking about, that are supposed to come to people who need it,
Aren't so
have become
automatic.
so complex and so controversial that the average person comes to my office and says things like, Ron, I don't know where to begin. Or I did begin, and the first thing that's happening is the insurance company says that they're not accepting what my doctor said I need, and I have to go to their doctor, and now I'm afraid, what do I do, and how does this work, and what's going on? So tinkering with the system for 17 years has led us from that concept of automatic benefits to where we are today, which is a mess. And I'll be the first one to say that my colleagues in the Ontario Trial Lawyers Association would love to see a system where they're not needed in this type of thing. Take us out of the equation where, why is this different from, say, your and my employment work industry? And I have an employment program in our firm, and if I need eyeglasses and my doctor says I need them and I send in the bill for $837 and I have up to $1,000 of coverage, I don't see an insurance company saying, wait a minute, we're going to send you to an eye specialist to see if you really need them. And then secondly, We're going to find out whether the cost of those glasses are really necessary at $837, or we couldn't find one for $737.
Okay, let me go to Pete
And
with
we're
this
having
then.
those debates, which we shouldn't have.
Does the insurance industry force too many I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed before it compensates people for the accidents they've been in?
The system that we have today is a government system. And so the forms that injured individuals have to get completed are all government forms. And the bureaucracy and the outdated regulations, there are over 630 regulations that Ontario auto insurance companies have to follow. You know, there is a lot of red tape. There is too much administration that goes on. And so that is a challenge as well that we've highlighted as an industry to government. You need to address those issues and make it simpler, make it clear for people so they don't need to seek out professional help. I started off my career in insurance as a claim representative, helping people through the claims process. And today, we still get at the Insurance Bureau's Consumer Center hundreds of calls from consumers who have questions because of the complexity of the system. The system is too complex. There's too many forms to be completed. It needs to be overhauled. We've said that. And so that is the focus that we need to take in terms of improving the system, making it work for Ontario drivers.
It sounds almost as if you're helping to make Ron's case because you acknowledge the system is so complicated, you might actually need a lawyer to get through it.
Well, you don't necessarily need a lawyer to get through it. And if we look at all the advertisements, let's talk about the legal community. And this report that David Marshall did highlighted within the report the fact that we need to be focusing on getting people the dollars to individuals for treatment. 35% of those payments that should be going to individuals actually go to lawyers and other businesses that have
too
grown
big a
up.
number?
That is way too big a number for those people who are injured and who need the treatment.
Is that
We
too
need to
big a
get those
number in your
dollars
view?
to them.
That's a big number. 35 cents
third?
on, yeah,
Too much.
too much.
Too much?
Absolutely, it should be zero. If the system was changed and we had forms that people could fill out, and I could send in that eyeglass thing because, something happened to my eye in the car accident, and we had a system that said, if you're injured, you have these benefits, send in the form, signed by your doctor, and you get it. Please, let me do other things that I can help my clients with where I add real value, and that's going to be in the court system. But understand today, people are up against a multi-billion-dollar industry of the insurance industry, and the average Ontarian says, how do I compete with this when my insurance adjuster says I'm not entitled to anything, or I'm not entitled to what I thought I was? And they're confused, they're worried, a family member is ill, so they come to lawyers.
Let me put one more thing on the table here then. We've had a couple of different explanations as to why premiums might be so high despite having relatively few accidents. Let's just hit this on the head. Fraud. How much fraud is in this system right now?
Well, that's a super good question because we don't know. The IBC did the anti-fraud task
Insurance
force.
Bureau of Canada.
Yes, I'm sorry, the Insurance Bureau of Canada did reports, and there were guesstimates within those reports, and there were two separate actuarial companies that looked at this. So the guesstimate is somewhere between 567 million and 1.2 billion, I think. So they've picked the 1.2 billion to pin on as being the actual number for fraud. It simply is unproven. Now, there's fraud in the system. We know that. But I don't think you can logically say that 1 out of 3 claimants who's denied is a fraudster, because that's how we're treated, and that's the message that we get from the insurer that we paid money to. So I don't think that fraud is anywhere near those numbers. And I think you should be honest about it and call it a guesstimate.
Well, let's go, but I want you to sit tight for a second, Pete. I want to hear what everybody else has to say on this first. Mary, how big is fraud in the system right now?
I'm going with the upper number of 1.2 to 1.3 billion. So here's a statistic, and it's from the GTA. If you look at Ministry of Transport numbers, about a 25% of accidents involve personal injury. If you look at insurance claims, about 52% of accidents cause personal injury in the GTA.
It's quite a disconnect.
Well, some of it's going to be those small fender benders that people know they should report to their insurer, but they don't. But having that difference to be doubled, yeah, I think there is a lot of fraud.
Can you, Ron, be, I'll quote Rona here, super candid with us right now?
Yeah.
And tell us what percentage of your prospective clients do you think are actually trying to screw the system?
100% that my clients who I continue to represent deserve every penny they get and more. And the rare occasion when I find out, and my colleagues in the Ontario Child Lawyers Association find out that somebody is not being honest with them, they can leave. I want no part of them, and I don't want them in the system. And you know why? Because I care about the people I represent, and so do my colleagues. And every time a fraudster is out there, takes $1 out of the system, that's $1 less in that system for the people who really need it.
Right.
And I agree that fraud is an issue, and to the extent that the insurers have some information about that, I wish we could know more and have that shared with us so that we could collectively, and we're on the same side on this, our association on the insurance industry, let's get rid of it, get it out of there. But understand one more thing too, is I think Rona very astutely points out. Why is it that more than 1 out of 3 people are being denied their claims? It can't be that they're all fraudsters. And let me say this to you, when they come to lawyers, and then lawyers appeal or do what's necessary to confront the insurer with the denial that we say is improper denial, and they get approved, do we have a statistic to say when are insurance companies improperly denying claims? We're not going to call that insurance company fraud, right? And I'm not sure if the people whose claims are denied are automatically being called fraudsters, because, you know, reasonable people can sometimes disagree on whether you need this benefit. And if it's denied, do you call that person a fraudster?
Okay, let's look at this coin. We're going to look at both sides of the coin with Pete. How much fraud's in the system?
Well, the number that's been bandied about is $1.2 to $1.3 billion annually on auto insurance in Ontario. It's a big number. It translates to $236 per insured vehicle, which is a lot of money. And so what is that fraud? Where does it arise? There are many different examples. We've seen cases where, and there have been news reports highlighting medical providers who have submitted fraudulent claims, individuals who are benefiting from that. We see even tow truck operators who are at the open end of that. There have been news reports addressing that, and the provincial government's tried to deal with that. We even have, unfortunately, you know, you may look at this from the perspective that, and I have to take some offense with regards to what the injury lawyers are saying, because just this January, there was a news report highlighting how one personal injury firm was the defendant in a class action by 1,800 clients for their double dipping and overbilling those clients. So if that isn't an example of a problem with the system, there's a whole range of fraud that we have to deal with. And the problem is that people are focused on the dollars within the system. There's a lot of money, and we need to address that. Thus, we need to get to the concept of focusing on getting people care.
Okay, how good do you think the insurance companies are at rooting out fraud when they think they see it?
I think the insurance companies are doing the best that they can, recognizing that we're all concerned about costs, and so the cost to then implement some of these tactics to identify fraud is going to increase the costs to insurance companies and to consumers, and they're mindful of that. The provincial government has addressed with a new regulator that part of their mandate is going to be fraud, which is a good thing. We want a focus on the issue to highlight for people that whether you're claiming excessive payments or treatments that you never delivered or fraudulent collisions, we're seeing an influx of those cases. You just need to look on the roads today. People have dash cam videos to protect themselves from some of these staged collisions and the like. So we have to address the issue.
Sure. Let's put another issue on the table here. You've all heard of something called postal code discrimination. There's a member of the Ontario legislature from Brampton named Guratan Singh, Jagmeet Singh's younger brother, the leader of the federal NDP. It's his younger brother who's the member in the Ontario legislature. He's got a private member's bill out there called Ending Automobile Insurance Discrimination in the Greater Toronto Area, because he thinks that, and he thinks he has evidence to suggest, Rona, that if you live in a particular postal code, you are more likely to get dinged with a higher rate than, say, if you're in another postal code. Are Greater Toronto Area residents, in your view, being unfairly dinged?
I think they probably are, and I think consumers are very unhappy about it. And when you think about driving, it stands to reason. We're not standing still. We're not just driving in the area in which we live. We drive all over, and all of us did today to get here. So should you be penalized by where you live? I don't think so. And consumers are very angry about this. I think that it'll push up costs in more rural areas, but we all drive in Toronto, and vice versa. A lot of people from Toronto drive north. And so it seems like a very unfair way to divvy up who pays what.
We do have to discriminate a little bit, right? We should discriminate against lousy drivers.
Well, we should,
That's fair
but
to
that's
say.
individuals. That's an individual sort of rating, and
Right.
I certainly believe in that. But I also think that there are areas in Toronto where there is a lower income level, and that you're much less likely to have long-term disability insurance or something. So when those people get in an accident, they are definitely going to make an auto insurance claim. Whereas if you have a long-term disability or some coverage through work, you're going to make your claim against that first, because that's what the law reads. That insurers are the payer of last resort. That's a big issue and is separate from what we're talking about right now. But I do think there is some unfairness in the system that needs to be leveled out. And just because an area has lower income and is making more auto insurance claims, it doesn't mean that they're worse drivers.
Do you see postal code discrimination as being a thing?
You have to somehow allocate costs. And you know, if we want to go down that route, then we can just go to like a Quebec system or a BC system. Everyone pays the same premium, regardless of your age, your gender, how long you've been driving. Those are all other assets or ways that we could discriminate against drivers.
Are you recommending that?
No.
You don't want to do that?
I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that because there's a huge body of academic literature that says if you don't charge people the right premium, the premium that matches their risk, if you charge them too much, they actually are more likely to claim. If you charge them too little, they drive more and they will have more accidents. Right now, postal code is a pretty easy way to discriminate among driving conditions. You're right, I drove into Toronto today, but I don't do much of my driving in Toronto. You know, your postal code actually picks up, you know, how good are your roads, how congested are your roads, what's snowfall like, how much rain do you get. To move away from postal code discrimination, I think we'd have to go to a usage-based insurance, where everyone has a little stick in their car.
Let's talk about, we've been down this road before, right, many times. I've got a list here of, we talked about the fact it was the Bob Rae government that initially brought in the system we have right now, but governments have tried to revisit and fix our auto insurance system in 1994, 96, 2003, 2006, 2010, 2013, 2015, 2016. They have had a kick at this can so many times, and yet we have yet apparently to find the sweet spot here of what will make a good system that can get broad buy-in. Why, Pete?
I think, as we've seen over the years, it has been an attempt to find a political solution to put a Band-Aid on the problem, rather than overhaul the system completely. Using an automobile analogy, most of us who have vehicles, there reaches a point when you decide that it's no longer economical to continue to repair an older vehicle, and you go out and buy a newer vehicle. And so I think we've reached that point in Ontario with auto insurance, is that we recognize that we need a system that addresses the technologies of today that exist in terms of how even consumers want to interact with their insurance companies. Ontario, this is the 21st century. Ontario has such outdated and stale rules that do go back, in some cases, 20, 30 years, that need to be revised. We need to increase the level of innovation and competition in the system. We need to focus on consumer needs and wants and meeting those needs. Consumers can't get their proof of insurance pink slip electronically in Ontario. The only province that allows that is Nova Scotia. Yet you can do so much online, with the exception of getting your insurance policy sent to you. It's got to come through the mail. So there is a review that's needed in terms of trying to bring things into the 21st century. Many of the regulations, we talk about the geography and territories that we were just talking about, that's an outdated regulation as well. The province can only be divided up into 55 territories for insurance companies, yet if we want to identify people's risks more closely to how well they drive, we need regulations that allow insurance companies to offer, as Rona talked about, coverage like telematics or usage-based insurance. insurance companies are really hamstrung by those regulations
Let me go to Ron on this then. Why has it proved to be so elusive, government after government, year after year, to find that sweet spot which has broad buy-in?
I'll tell you one good reason for it, and it's because previous governments have tended to look to the insurance industry for solutions to the insurance policy problems, to the exclusion of consumers, like that organization that Rona's a part of sitting next to me, to the exclusion of our organization, which represents lawyers across this province representing the users of this system
You guys
who
get
understand
consulted, though, when they want to change the system? They
no,
don't
I'm sorry.
consult you?
I'm sorry. In past governments, we have had nothing more than some lip service to what we might be interested in doing, and what we found was that the input that we provided in a very modest way was ignored almost entirely. And I can tell you that we're really pleased to see that this new government that's in power now is interested in hearing from all stakeholders, and I really believe that they are, and they are listening to all stakeholders, and that is an opportunity to get the other sides, because the changes you've discussed that have been made over the past umpteen years have typically been insurance-driven changes where they have said, look, give us this change and we'll be able to bring premiums down. And so there are cuts. They are cuts, and it is death by 1,000 cuts to the people who need this system. And those cuts, have they resulted in any reduction in the premium? I think not. And I'm just going to go to one comment, too, about the postal discrimination, because I can't agree with Mary on this, where she believes that it's kind of an all-or-nothing thing. I think we as a society have some choices to make about what kind of discrimination we can tolerate and what we can't. And I think postal code discrimination is in the latter part, that we can't tolerate that. If I live in Toronto and drive to Brampton, am I more likely to get in an accident than someone who lives in Brampton and drives to Toronto? I don't get the fact that we should charge people different rates based on where they live. We advocate for personal responsibility. If you're a good driver and you haven't been in accidents and you have a clean record, you should have a better rate than somebody who has a lousy driving record, who's speeding all the time and has been in 6 crashes. And that's the kind of actuarial science that should be going into this. And we think that insurance is all about spreading risk so that Ontarians across the province know that we're being fairly treated. And we have to decide what's fair.
Let me get back to Rona on this issue of consultation. Your group is obviously deeply invested in this issue.
Well,
have you talked to anybody in the government about it?
We have. We've talked to the past government. We participated in as many of these stakeholder consultations as we possibly could, but they weren't listening. It was, I think, more of a game play.
You think they've written the rules basically the way that the industry wants them?
I mean, that's the general
written?
consensus, is that the ideas have been advanced, decisions have been made, and then consultations were happening. So there is the fact that the insurers have managed to effect changes in the Insurance Act. Over 30 things have been changed since No Fault came in, and every one of them has been at the request of the Insurance Bureau of Canada or auto insurers, and nothing has been done to help accident victims. So it's all been a very one-sided decision process by the past government and by the Conservatives before that. I mean, I've been watching this since 1990, really, since No Fault came in, and having been heard under the old system, where there were no hassles, you got what you needed, and I didn't sue because I got what I needed. Why would I sue? To getting hurt under this no-fault system.
You should just take a second here and explain that you're not here. You've been through this, is what I'm trying to say.
I've been through the system, the old one, and this newer no-fault system.
What happened to you? You want to just take a minute and tell us here?
My husband and I were hurt on our way to work. He was far more seriously injured than I was. So we made a claim, and I thought we could possibly do it without a lawyer, which was a huge mistake. We waited a year and then hired a lawyer. And the insurer finally settled the statutory accident benefits 24 years later. That's not a system that's working.
Why did it take that long?
I don't know. They fought on everything. As far as I could see, they fought on what the injury was. He's been assessed over and over again. And despite all the medical reports that supported his injury, because it gets to be where you get a medical report and you say, oh, it says I'm injured, oh, good. You know something's wrong. What you should be doing is getting information that tells you how to get better and how they're going to help you. And that's not happening. Okay,
Pete, obviously I'm not going to ask you to speak to her particular situation, which you have no background on, but you have certainly heard the allegation that the industry somehow manages to get politicians to write regulations that satisfy the industry, and that you set premiums too high because you want to make too much money. You want to speak to that?
Well, let me just go back to that one point, especially when you look at the past government that made a promise for political purposes to cut rates by 15%. Again, that was something that was done for political gain.
They did it to save their necks. The NDP forced them to, or they said they'd bring them down.
Exactly. And who was left to address that and deal with it? The insurance companies. And they struggled because government put pressure on the industry to reduce premiums.
You never actually made it to 15% reduction, though.
Well, no, they didn't. But what did happen was rates, when inflation was going up, rates were still level and going down. So the net impact was savings to consumers, and that's a good thing. But the problem with the old government, and we're encouraged by the current government because they are talking to consumers, they're talking to drivers, they want to hear from people, and hopefully will roll up their sleeves and make some changes that will benefit everyone. And there are disputes in the system, and those are driving up costs too.
Can you hit that nail on the head, though, that I put at the end of my last question, which is, are premiums too high because your companies want to make too much money?
Well, that accusation has been made before, and the actual facts show that, and Marshall addresses it too, we are currently seeing that of every dollar an insurance company is paying out, or every dollar they're taking in, they're paying out $1.02. So for any business, you can't continue to operate in that system. On the auto insurance side, it's a loss that we're seeing that happens.
Let me go to Mary. You got some numbers on this?
Recently, third quarter 2018, for every dollar that is taken in Ontario Auto, 70 odd cents gets paid out to settle the claim, whether it goes to the claimants, the lawyers, someone else in the system, that's not tracked like that. And about another 10 to 12 cents on every dollar goes to the broker, goes to the commission. So you're left with about 15 cents for the insurer to actually keep the lights on, pay their employees.
You've studied this. Does that sound like a reasonable amount?
No.
What does it sound like to you?
It sounds like, they're using their equity holder surplus to cover claims.
So am I reading you right that you think actually the industry isn't making enough money right now?
No, they're not making enough money for their owners. If I'm a shareholder in a company, I deserve an appropriate rate of return. We don't complain maybe we do complain when banks make money or when other companies make money. Insurers should be allowed to make money too.
And if I can, Steve, just to highlight that point, recently in Ontario, we've seen the transition, actually it's occurred elsewhere, but it was centered in Ontario, where one of the long-standing insurance companies, that was State Farm, sold their business because it was unprofitable. They sold their business to Desjardins. And so that is what's happening in the industry. We're seeing that companies are struggling, and here we have a company that was in the Canadian market for well over 50 years, in Ontario, in Alberta, in the Maritimes, because auto insurance is a problem in all those areas. It was costing them more money, so they decided to pull up stake and leave.
Okay, with time running out, Ron, come on back on that.
Sure. Does anybody really buy that insurance companies are clamoring for your business or spending millions of dollars on television advertising to get into a business that they know they're losing 2 cents on every dollar on? I don't buy that. I don't think anybody buys that. And they're not being, in our view, completely transparent with what they're making. And we don't have a real breakdown and real transparency about what these insurers are making. And by the way, nobody on my side of the table objects to insurance companies making reasonable returns. That's okay. But really, we need to have that transparency. And State Farm left. Well, Desjardins bought them out for apparently good reasons and are getting lots of business. And I think the truth is that the report said that when that company transacted, that State Farm then reinvested $450 million into Desjardins at the time as well. So they're not altogether out.
Ron, as you know, that was, as sometimes when someone buys a home too, to help with the deal, they put some money, some equity in, and that's what we saw there. And if we're talking about advertising, obviously your group and injury lawyers are one of the leaders in terms of the millions of dollars that they spend in advertising for clients, trying to give the impression that when someone is hurt, there is the potential for money. And that is a drive to the bottom. And Rona can appreciate the fact, as I can as a victim, we need to focus on individuals getting the proper health care to help them recover, rather than disputes in the system.
Let me give you the last word then on this, Rhoda, and that is, how optimistic are you that this government, this time, will fix this?
I'm more optimistic than one would expect, and I think partially because what we're not talking about here is the download of the cost of accident victims to the public purse, because almost all of the accident victims who are our members, a number in the hundreds, are on ODSP. They start off on OW and end up on ODSP.
Disability Support Program.
Ontario Disability Support Program, or they go to Canada Pension Disability. So that's not something the consumer knows when they're paying the big bucks for the premiums, is that they're going to end up on one of these public supports. There's an awful lot of offloading going on, and I also find it difficult to believe that insurers aren't making money when you're trying to expand the Ontario model to Newfoundland and to BC, saying it's, we know better and we can make money where you can't. There's no way there isn't a lot of money in here, and it's incompetence, I believe, on the part of insurers, the way they lose money and what they spend their money on. A couple of years ago, Aviva acknowledged that they spent $44 million on their in-house lawyers in one single year. They have 6-point-something% of the market share. That's an awful lot of money to spend on lawyers to fight your own customers.
I think the consumer is going to get the last word on this part. I want to thank all of you for coming in, and I think helping our viewers understand why this is such a complex topic and why governments tread perilously as they try to find solutions on all this. Thank you all for coming into TVO tonight.
Glad to be here.
Thank
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.